and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. Today is December 6th. It's Friday, 2019, and tonight's topic is the presidential elections of 1956, 1972, and 1984 provide predictive clues for the presidential election of 2020. In the last episode, we talked about how the incumbent president generally will win re-election if he is not challenged by his own party significantly, and or the other side is in disarray. Now, in this case, we have both. We have the Democrat Party in 2020. Right now, currently, the way it stands is there's no clear front runner for the nomination, and no significant challenger has emerged for President Trump. But let's take a look at a couple of elections and as examples just to show how this has played out in the past. Last time we discussed 1968, and we showed how the Democrats were in massive disarray after President Johnson, who would have been the incumbent president running, decided not to run after he received a significant challenge from a relatively unknown senator in the name of Eugene McCarthy. And the Democrats, as you know, went on to lose in 1968 to Richard Nixon. But let's go back to 1956. In 1956, the president was Dwight D. Eisenhower. Now, President Eisenhower was elected in 1952, and he ran against someone called Adlai Stevenson, and he won rather handily. He won 55% of the vote. He won 39 states, and Stevenson won just 9 states, and he got 44% of the vote. Now, the reason Eisenhower won without any experience was he had been a war hero in World War II, and he had led the D-Day invasion in 1944, which turned the tide of the Allies to victory over the Axis powers. So Dwight Eisenhower, while he wasn't the most charismatic speaker, did not really run on a number of policies. He ran in the 1950s and 1952 and 1956 and won re-election easily the second time. Now, for those of you who are thinking, well, the Democrats are in disarray in 2020, but they've got a couple of things up their sleeve. One of them is Hillary Clinton. Now, Hillary Clinton actually provides a good case study for why the Democrats lost in 2016, because she was, in a sense, the incumbent, ready to run on the legacy of Barack Obama, who was president for 2 terms. She had been a Secretary of State. But Bernie Sanders actually harmed her by running against her the entire time and might have won the nomination but for the meddling of the Democratic National Committee. And she even said yesterday on the Howard Stern program that Bernie Sanders indeed hurt her. So she's absolutely right that a challenge in any primary, if the party has a significant primary challenge where they don't sort themselves out until the convention, it's going to be very tough for that party to win unless both parties are having that difficulty. But in any event, Hillary Clinton also provides another historic example. In 1952, Eisenhower beat Adlai Stevenson. And there were some questions about Eisenhower. He had never had political office, and so some people were concerned that maybe he was not up for the job. Now, just step back on who's up for the job of president. Really nobody, because other than, I would say, the best training to be president would probably be the governor of a large state, because there you're dealing with all of the different apparatus of government, somewhat of a mini circumstance. You've got the executive branch and the governor. You've got the House of Representatives and the Senate. Most states are set up that way. So you could argue that a governor is probably the best training, but really no one's trained to be president. Now, once you've been president for 4 years, a lot of people thought John Kennedy was untested as a senator. Senators have even less experience, administrative experience, because essentially they're just running and representing a state. They're representatives rather than executives. But once you've been president for 4 years, you've pretty much either dispelled the idea that you're not fit or you're not qualified, because you've been president for 4 years, and Barack Obama was the same way. He may not have been, in many people's minds, equipped or fit or having the experience to run for president when he ran after just being a two-term senator. But after 4 years, he had enough experience because he had been president for 4 years. Well, the same applies to Donald Trump, and the same applied to Dwight Eisenhower in 1952. Whatever questions people had whether Dwight Eisenhower was up for the job, well, he'd been president for 4 years and nothing wrong happened in the country. And the mistake the Democrats made in 1956 is where Hillary Clinton comes in. They decided to run Adlai Stevenson again against Eisenhower. And this was a big mistake because if Adlai Stevenson lost in 1952 to an untested political figure in the name of Dwight Eisenhower, how did they expect him to do any better in 1956? And indeed, he did not do any better. He did worse. So while in 1952, Eisenhower won handily with 55% of the vote, 39 states. Well, in 1956, Eisenhower won by an even bigger margin. He won 57.4% to Adlai Stevenson's only 42%. And Adlai Stevenson only won 7 states. And they were in the Deep South. What's interesting, back then, the Democrats held the Deep South. It wasn't until 1972 that the Republicans flipped the Deep South over to their column. Which brings us to 1972. So, before we get to 1972, the point is, running a candidate that lost has not worked in the modern era. Adlai Stevenson's the only time they've ever tried it. You can run and lose for your own party's nomination many times. Reagan did in 68, he did in 76, and he finally won the nomination in 1980. But you cannot run for president and lose. That's why Mitt Romney was not renominated. That's why John McCain wasn't renominated. Once you lose, you're pretty much branded in the public eye as a loser. Unless, now there was the case in 1960 with Richard Nixon where he lost to Kennedy and came back in 1968. Now that was a circumstance where some said Kennedy actually would have lost if there weren't shenanigans in Chicago, leading Kennedy to win Illinois. And also there was an 8-year period. Nixon didn't run the next time period and against the same person. In other words, Nixon didn't even try to run against Kennedy in 1964. Well, Kennedy had died, but Nixon waited 8 years before he ran again. And he did indeed win. But we do not have an example of a candidate who loses 1 year and then the next, in the modern era, and then the next election comes back and beats the incumbent president. And the reason for that is the power of the incumbency is very powerful. It's hard to overcome unless you get challenged within your own party. And there the idea is if you can't unite your own party, how are you going to run the country? But if you do have party unison, you win. So, for example, now we're going to 1972. Nixon won easily in 1972 as the incumbent. Why? Well, in 1972, the Democrats were still a mess after the 1968 fiasco, which we talked about in the last podcast. No clear winner emerged from the Democratic primaries. You had Humphrey, McGovern, and George Wallace all getting about 20-25% of the vote. You had a guy named Muskie running, Scoop Jackson. There was a cast of Democrat candidates running, none of them with a clear majority, and they ended up nominating George McGovern, and George McGovern was a senator from South Dakota, and he was considered an extreme leftist. I think they're saying acid, amnesty, and abortion, what he stood for. He was out of the mainstream for America at that time, and he lost by one of the biggest margins ever. Actually, it was 61% for Nixon, 37% for McGovern. McGovern won 1 state. And again, it would have been hard to beat Nixon anyway, but the Democrats clearly did not have a clear winner, a person the whole party could unite around. They had McGovern, and that just didn't work. And in fact, they had problems during the campaign. McGovern picked Muskie as his running mate. Muskie then had issues. Apparently, he had seen a psychiatrist. Back then, that was taboo. You don't go see a psychiatrist if you're running for president or have any type of psychological, what they deemed at the time, disorders. if you're going to be commander-in-chief. So we had to pick another guy. He picked Sergeant Shriver. It was an absolute disaster and a blowout victory for Richard Nixon. Now, remember, here's the parallel to Trump. Nixon was despised by the left. Nixon was despised by the media. Substantial portions of the public hated Richard Nixon, called him Tricky Dick. There was already whiffs of Watergate. No matter, he still won in 1972 by a wide margin. Now, speaking of psychological disorders, before we get to 1984, we have to talk about the Democrats' front runner. His name is Joe Biden. Now, Joe has two issues. He is a gaffe and a half most of the time, but it looks like it's getting worse. And I just want to play two clips. One with a voter. He got into a very, I would say it was inadvisable exchange with a voter. The guy was 83 years old, and he raised a question about Biden and his son in Ukraine. I'm not going to play what he said because it's hard to hear, but when you listen to Biden's answer, you never go after a voter unless that voter represents some extreme view that no voters have. He asked the question, he said, look, we all know about Trump and the Ukraine and what he's trying to do there, but didn't you also try to influence or use foreign power to help your son? And here's how Biden responds. Now, keep in mind, the guy who asked the question, the 83-year-old, did not say that Biden was too old, didn't say Biden wasn't fit to be president. He only said that he thought that Biden was also using political influence. And listen to how Joe Biden, this to me shows no political skills, but listen to what his answer was.
We all know Trump did a job and worked for a gas company in order to get access to the public, to the president. So you're selling access to the president just like he is. So
You're a damn liar, man. That's not true. And no one has ever said that. No one has done that.
He says, you're a damn liar to a voter. And now listen to how he goes off now.
I see it on the TV.
You see it on the TV. No, I know you do. And by the way, that's why I'm not sedentary. I get up and no, let him go. Let him go. Look, the reason I'm running is because I've been around a long time and I know more than most people know.
Okay, so the reason he's running, he's been around a long time and he knows more than most people know. That would mean anybody who's over a certain age is fit to be president. But listen to where he goes from here.
And I can get things done. That's why I'm running. And you want to check my shape on, let's do push-ups together here, man. Let's do.
You want to check my shape? Let's do push-ups together, man. He's talking to an 83-year-old voter. And what is he proving? That he can do more push-ups than an 83-year-old guy? And how is that any way relevant to being president?
Let's run. Let's do whatever you want to do. Let's take an IQ test.
Then he says, you can't hear it when the people are clapping, he says, let's take an IQ test. I don't know who he thinks he's talking to, but chances are he's not going to win an IQ test either. But it gets worse than that. Now remember, the reason I'm not picking on Joe Biden, although I am, is he is the front runner. He's the guy who can barely crack 25, 30% in the Democrat primary, which wouldn't be enough even if he was a fantastic candidate to beat an incumbent president. But then there's the weird factor. There's the creepy Joe factor. This video emerged. This to me is astounding. This is disqualifying on its face. Not because it indicates he's done anything wrong. It's just strange. Now have a listen to what Joe Biden says to a group of people and children at the dedication of some pool in Delaware.
And by the way, you know, I sit on the stand and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun.
Okay, so he's got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. All right, so he just wants to say that. I'm not sure why in a public speech you want to talk about your hairy legs, but listen to where he goes from there.
And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down.
Okay, so the kids reach into the pool and rub his leg down. This is like some fond memory he has of his days at this pool. Kids reaching into the pool and rubbing his blonde-haired legs down.
So it was straight and then watch the hair come back up again.
like it's a science experiment, like, and watch the hair come back up again. He's dedicating a pool.
They look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids.
So he learned about roaches. I don't know how that experience, which I'm not sure is a valuable life experience, teaches him about roaches. I don't know what the connection is there.
Kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap. And
Okay, now I'm going to play it again without the editorialization. He loves kids jumping on his lap. Have a listen again.
I tell you what. And by the way, you know, I sit on the stand and it get hot. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. And the kids used to come up and reach in the pool and rub my leg down so it was straight, and then watch the hair come back up again. They look at it. So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
All right. Now, you could say, what about Trump? He says a lot of outrageous things. What about the Access Hollywood tape? Well, yeah, what about it? I mean, what Donald Trump said on the Access Hollywood tape is in poor taste. But you have to remember, many people have heard that type of locker room talk, as they call it, that type of misogyny, whatever you want to call it. Many people have either said those things, many voters have said those things or have heard those things. I'm not saying they all like those things, but they're not considered, well, that's weird. Not nobody, but I'm sure the vast majority of people do not have the same experience, have never said they put their leg in the pool and they have hairy legs and they have the children come and rub the hairs down on his leg and watch them go back up, and that they know a lot about roaches. So that's just not going to connect with voters. Not that saying misogynist things is going to help with voters, but some people did excuse Donald. They did not consider that a disqualifying statement, meaning some voters voted for him anyway. But most people, if they were to hear Joe Biden say those types of things, they're not going to vote for him. It's really not something that's defensible or something that people could say, oh, yeah, what's just a little bit of rubbing leg? What is he talking? He knows about roaches. Okay, anyway, the reason I mention that is because it highlights that there is not a front runner, and the front runner is, to me, the least electable of the group. Now, where does that leave the rest of the group? Well, if Biden drops out, where does the support go? Well, there's no logical place for somebody who's... The only reason that Joe Biden has the support that he has is because he was vice president and he has name recognition, and that's about it. But where are those people going to go? Well, they're all going to start looking at all the other Democrat candidates. They're going to look at Buttigieg, they're going to look at Booker, Yang, Castro, Sanders, Warren. They're going to look at them all. But there's no logical place where 25%, they're all going to get scattered to the wind. Some will go to Bloomberg. Now, Kamala Harris dropped out. Whatever 6 to 8% support she had, where's that going to go? It's not even going to all go to the front runner. It's not going to all go to Biden. It's not all going to go to Harris, Booker, Bernie. So, again, it's still splintering. Now, all this could change. You say, well, Hillary Clinton can come up. I don't think so, because then you have the Adlai Stevenson, Dwight Eisenhower 1956 story all over again. And remember, a losing candidate loses the first time. There is a stigma. And also, remember, there are a lot of people who voted for Trump almost on a lark or almost on, well, maybe, okay. A lot of those people are happy with him now. And they're more comfortable in voting for him. And if Hillary Clinton runs again, I'm not sure there's going to be the enthusiasm. And also, if she does run again, she probably won't run. She'd probably just hope, like Humphrey did in 1968, that they couldn't come up with a candidate. Remember, he was the vice president to Johnson, and there was so many people running that you had Kennedy, you had McCarthy, you had a bunch of people running in 1968. They finally just said, okay, we'll pick Humphrey. And Humphrey lost. But if they did that with Hillary Clinton, I just don't see how she beats Trump this time around, when whatever issues people had about Trump, he's already answered. People know exactly what he is now. He's been president. You can't say he doesn't have the experience to be president. He's been president. He has some successes. He has some failures. But he hasn't really harmed his case to the American public, other than people already against him. But that doesn't mean they're going to be for Hillary any more than they were in 2016. So let's move on then to 1984. You've got the same issue. All three cases, Eisenhower in 56, Nixon in 72, and Reagan in 1984, you have Republican presidents who are incumbents, and they all win in landslides. Even when, in 1956, the Democrats are united, but they're united in nominating the person who lost, Adlai Stevenson, in 1952, again in 1956. Then in 1972, you had an incumbent president, Nixon, running against McGovern, who was picked out of a group of four people who had run for president that year, and he never really got over 25% of that vote, and there was no way he was going to unite the party, and Nixon won handily. Now, Reagan in 1984 was a different figure than Nixon in 1972, and a similar figure to Dwight Eisenhower in 1956. Reagan came in, like Nixon, very unpopular with the left, but became, because he was, I don't know if it was his avuncular style, but he won over a lot of people. He was funny. He wasn't, the way Trump is towards his adversaries is very nasty. He says, you're fake news, sit down, not you. Reagan was always very congenial, even to his adversaries, and he won over some of the press, even though they were against him. And I think that really helped Reagan, and Reagan also had a good economy. After a very bad economy, the U.S. suffered through from basically for 10 years, from the early 70s all the way through 1984. 1984, there was finally, the year he was running, signs of a very strong recovery, and that's how Reagan won. And he won because he was the incumbent, and the Democrats really were not united. They weren't as disunited as they were in 1972, but they were running. The problem with 1984 was they were really trying to recapture Carter versus Reagan. Remember, Reagan beat Carter in 1980. Who did they run in 1984? Carter's vice president, Mondale. Not too smart. If Carter couldn't beat Reagan, why would his vice president be able to beat Reagan? And the party wasn't unified around Mondale very much. He only won about 35-40% of the vote. He and Gary Hart battled it out to the convention. Gary Hart was probably a better candidate. He was perceived as more vigorous, younger. He was a senator from Colorado. You had, Reggie Jackson running. You had Jesse Jackson also running. He won a couple of states. So Mondale was not the clear pick. He was somewhat the pick of the Democrat establishment because he'd been vice president. But he wasn't the overwhelming pick to run against Reagan. And again, Reagan was the incumbent. He wasn't challenged by his own party. So there really was no reason for any Democrat to have won that year either. So that brings us again now to 2020. If Trump is not challenged, and there's no reason to think Trump is going to get a significant challenge from his own party, and if the Democrats cannot, by, I'd say, March, start to congeal around a winner, meaning someone that the party is going to support. If it ends up being Biden, he loses in a landslide. Because Biden not only doesn't have the big support, I can't see how he can campaign talking about kids come up to him and reach into the pool and rub his leg up and down. That's just not going to work, even if he had 50% of the support of the Democrat Party right now, which he doesn't. And the others that are in the field right now, I just don't see them catching any type of fire. Kamala Harris showed promise at the beginning, and then Tulsi Gabbard just put her in her place in one debate, and that's the end of Kamala Harris. She's gone. Bloomberg is not going to win over the party simply because he's one of the billionaires. Bernie Sanders really has no shot. There's some of the Democrat Party that think he caused Hillary Clinton to lose. He's also an avowed socialist, which probably the United States is not ready for. Elizabeth Warren is probably not going to be able to crack much. She might get, if Biden drops out and Sanders drops out, start to get some of the we gotta find somebody, we gotta congeal around somebody, maybe Elizabeth Warren, but there's many people in the Democrat Party said they can't support her because of her taxes on on Wall Street, and she's going to need that support. And Democrats have been very good in the past 30 years of picking up, ever since Bill Clinton, picking up Wall Street support. Well, she'd lose that. Pete Buttigieg, now he possibly can get back into it, but there's no guarantee that he catch fire. And then you've got Yang and Klobuchar, and it's just downhill from there. Booker, Castro, you got Steyer, Gabbett, and Bennett. So unless the Democrats can quickly come up with one of these people and rally around them, they really don't have a really, and just historically, this is not I'm not projecting what I want to happen. I don't think that they have a shot. And again, even if they were to resurrect Hillary Clinton or decide they were going to run Oprah or Michelle Obama, that's not going to work unless those two, and they would have a shot, but they'd have to run now. They'd have to be the clear choice, which I think it's too late for that already, because all of the other candidates have their own splinter support for each of their candidates. For them all of a sudden to say, I don't like Bernie anymore, I don't like Warren anymore, I don't like Harris, Yang, Klobuchar, Bloomberg, I'm just going to be for Oprah or for Michelle Obama. I don't think that that's possible. And again, the issue that Michelle Obama and Oprah would have is they're more unknown than Trump was. Michelle was first lady. I guess you can get some of that presidential stuff might rub off on you. And you could say Oprah Winfrey's a successful businesswoman. I mean, those are in lieu of political experience you might have. But Oprah said she's not interested in it. And I also think that Oprah is a beloved person when she's not in politics. Once you get into politics, they're going to start talking about Epstein. They're going to start talking about Harvey Weinberg, whatever his name is. And then she's going to lose whatever halo she has. And I don't think she wants that. So I really don't think that there's a possibility, unless there is something like a black swan, something we can't think of. That's a true black swan. People think a black swan, they say, what are the black swans? Well, if you can think of them, then they're not black swans. Because remember, the concept of a black swan is something that you've never seen before. Oprah entering the race is not a black swan. Why? Because we can conceive that she could enter the race, but I don't think that she's going to, and I don't think that she would have a shot. I don't think right now that there's anything that I can foresee that would change the results of the election. Let's see what you think, but also I do want to thank, I received, it seems like once a week now, I go to the mailbox, I get something very, very nice. This coming to us, it's sideways there, from Canada, but you can see what that is. Canadian listener sent me a 1989 Canadian silver maple leaf. Now you can see it in the petit paquet, the pas avion, the small packet, direct from, I think that was from Edmonton, Canada. And they sent that to Smaulgld, LLC, P.O. Box 714, Dover, New Hampshire, 03820. Big thank you for that. Made my day, week, going to the post office and getting a very special gift there. All right, well, let's see what you guys are saying in the comments section. And I'm going to put up some, as we discuss this, I'm going to put up some subliminal messages for you guys to get back into the mug buying business. They're starting to see a pickup in sales of Smaulgld merchandise. I do appreciate that. That does help the site out as well. All right, let's see what we're saying in the comment section. Who do we have here? All right, Silver Wolverine. Hillary's doing Howard Stern, or she's trying, but nobody wants her except Cal in New York. Yeah, that's where she made the point. I mean, Hillary Clinton is probably a better political analyst than she is a candidate. I mean, she definitely understands the game, and she's absolutely right that Bernie hurt her. But then she hurts herself by saying that. She hurts herself for coming off as whining about Bernie Sanders hurting her. Because remember, if she runs again, she's going to need Bernie's support, and she basically dismissed them. Well, the other thing she did, which was very foolish, which I think helped her lose, when she called the Trump supporters deplorable. That's not smart either. You don't insult portions of the electorate that are significant, just like what Biden did. You don't tell a guy he's a damn liar and challenge him to a push-up match and an IQ test. That's just the height of stupidity. But anyway, so what else we got here? Pablo says Democrats are resigning, running for president. Latest Kamala, I guess not to be branded as loser. That's right. Now, Kamala Harris is smart politically in some respects because I guess she's thinking she dropped out. If Biden somehow gets his act together, which I don't think it's possible, he would pick her or someone else would pick her just to, quote, balance out the ticket. And then she's not branded as a loser. She wrapped up her 10 early. So you're absolutely right, Pablo. I agree with that. That's the Democrat. And I think that's the reason, for example, in 1984, they gave it to Mondale. If you're going to lose anyway, we might as well just get rid of this whole Carter-Mondale thing and pave the way for new Democrats in 1988. Well, here you go. Pablo says what I was saying. What I did say, he said this earlier. He said, I won't be surprised Michelle Obama would be thrown into the ring. Yeah, and I think that is the Hail Mary. And I think one of the things I think that the Obama administration, Biden, Hillary are very concerned about is Trump isn't impeached and Trump wins again. Not the entire, but a good portion of what you would call the deep state apparatus will be dismantled and a lot of things will come out and some of them may even be personally at risk. I think that's why they're pushing Biden because he knows, see, if Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders wins, they're not going to care about Comey, Clapper, Brennan. Those aren't their people. They don't care about that. They're not part of that cabal. They have their own cabal they want to set up. So that's why the Democrat establishment doesn't really want Bernie to win or Elizabeth. They could care less. To them, whether Bernie wins or Trump wins, they're losers either way. So they're not really in favor of that. So that's why I think they're pushing Biden. And you're right, Pavel, they'll probably push Michelle Obama if it looked like someone other than Biden wasn't going to win. All right, let's see what else we have here. Pablo. Trump was branded as foul play in Ukraine, hence releasing his talk with President of Ukraine. Biden and his son have investment in Ukraine gas and oil, all the same kind of people. Yeah. Now, this whole thing is interesting. I mean, you have to give the Democrats a lot of credit for making, first of all, if Biden did the things that they say he did, Trump would be within his rights to ask to investigate, and they're making it out to be Trump is the one who should be impeached and investigated for asking them to investigate what really should be investigated. And we should want to know whether there was any type of issues with corruption in the Obama administration, with Joe Biden, with Hillary Clinton, and so on. But so far we haven't seen that get very far. All right, what else do we have tonight? Yeah, Silverine says Trump's strong economy, enough said. Again, that's another, some people like to look at the economy as the, what's the word, as one of the determinants as to who's going to win. And you can look at it that way. But there's been times where the incumbent has won. Like 1972, Nixon won. The economy wasn't very strong in 1972. In fact, he argued with his Fed chairman, just like Trump is doing now, Arthur Burns, was the Fed chair at the time, to lower interest rates because he wanted to get the economy going. So I think the incumbency is more important. The unity of the party is more important. The lack of the other party's ability to rally around one candidate is far more important than the economy. Although the economy certainly does help. And right now, what Trump has going for him is the economy is by the way they measure it, is doing well. There is no significant challenge from his own party, and the Democrats are in disarray. So historically, there's no reason he would lose, and there's no reason if Hillary Clinton would run again against him that somehow she'd have a better shot. Remember, she's 4 years older now. If she couldn't keep up pace last time, she's not going to be able to campaign in all the different places. This is Trump's to lose, and it's hard to see him losing it because everything he does offends a lot of people, but when he offends a lot of people, he also gains more support. So he'd have to do something that would offend his own supporters. And his own supporters seem to like pretty much everything that he does. So that's going to be hard to do. All right. Fiona Whalen. Marty Armstrong says that Hill will run 99% and that Guy doesn't have connections and access to information from behind the curtain. Who is Hill? Says that Hill will run. Oh, Hillary. I have to disagree. I don't think Martin Armstrong knows anything, but that's a different story. I don't mean anything. I think that he's, in my mind, he's overrated as an analyst. Ann Holloman, I wonder what Smaulgld thinks about us getting negative rates. I don't think we'll get negative rates. I think the United States, a couple of reasons. Part of the reasons I said the Fed would raise interest rates 3, 4, 5 years ago when everyone says they wouldn't, couldn't, could never, would never do it, was because, remember, the U.S. is the world reserve currency. If you want people to buy debt, foreigners to buy debt, anyone to buy debt, you have to offer a rate of interest, and that's what the dollar pays. Other central banks don't pay it, don't have to pay it. Second reason is interest rates as a way of manipulating the economy only go so far. What the central banks have learned, including the Fed, and during the last 10 years, and the Fed even noted this in its minutes, that buying assets has a far more, in their minds, salubrious impact on the economy, a far more direct impact. They can buy what they want to rise. So, for example, if you want real estate to rise, or you want the stock market to rise, yeah, you can fiddle around with the interest rates and encourage people to invest, or you can just buy the stocks, or you can buy the real estate investment trust, and then you can get everything to go higher. And they realize that, and they have that power, and I think the Fed has said, rather than interest rates, rather than just taking interest rates lower, we need to look at increasing the size of the QE. Remember when they first did QE, it was some type of temporary program, emergency program. Now it's just something in their toolkit, and they're saying, we learned how to do this over the last 10 years, and one of the things we learned is we did a lot of it. We did $4 trillion, but we probably could have done $8 trillion. And we only bought mortgage-backed securities and U.S. Treasuries. We probably should be looking at buying other assets. So, as I been mentioning for a while now, I believe that sometime early next year, the Fed's going to come out and say, okay, next time there's a crisis, we want the authority to buy U.S. stocks, U.S. corporate bonds, and so on. Because right now, they're not allowed to. All right, what else do we got here? Mint Mark. Keep in mind, no matter who the nominee is, the majority of me will get behind them no matter what they say. That has a lot of weight. Yeah, but, that was true with McGovern in 1972. The media hated Nixon. He still won. Remember, the media was 100% behind Hillary Clinton. And we didn't, back then they didn't have Google and all this other stuff. But it's going to be very hard to manipulate an election for somebody like, let's just go through all of them. Let's say it's Biden. Biden's his own worst enemy. I can't see him winning. I think he's the weakest of all the candidates just because he's a gaffe and a half. If Warren wins it, if Sanders wins it, if Buttigieg, whoever wins it is not going to win it with the large... They're going to win it with 20, 30% of the popular vote. Unless that changes. Unless all of a sudden everyone just throws a towel and says, let's go for Warren, or let's go for Sanders, or let's go for Buttigieg, or let's go for Bloomberg. Unless that happens... It's going to be very hard for the media to make out the Democrat nominee as the one that everybody wants, because the people, even the Democrats, are going to know that that's not true. Remember, the Bernie people were the only people against Hillary. It was the whole Democratic Party versus Bernie. Well, it's not that way today. Now it's Bernie, it was Harris, it was Buttigieg, it was Warren, it's Biden. It's the whole group of them. So it's going to be very hard to say so what they try to do against Bernie, say, he's just bothering us. Everybody wants Hillary. Well, there's no way they could say everybody wants Biden today when you got 8 other people running against them. And they're not dropping out. Now, Harris did drop out, but Bloomberg entered. So Bloomberg took Harris's 4%, although not the same 4%. All right, I think that's about it for tonight. We'll try to get back together again tomorrow for Saturday Night Silver with Smaulgld. So thank you very much for joining me, and we'll see you tomorrow.